You're on a page dedicated to history. Here, we explore the past to help you relax and gain new insights. Subscribe and like, because by the end of our story, you'll sleep soundly. Close your eyes and let's begin. When discussing the great peoples of Eurasia, we often think of the Greeks, Romans, Chinese, and Arabs. Yet, there's another significant branch of humanity, the Turks, who influenced the continent's fate for centuries. Their legacy is so vast that it's hard to imagine the development of Asia, Eastern Europe, and even the Middle East without it. The Turks played a crucial role in shaping the political map of Eurasia, creating khanates and empires while becoming allies and adversaries of the greatest powers of their time. From Siberia to the Balkans, from China to the Middle East, their cultural, linguistic, and political traces are everywhere. Their history spans epochs of great migrations, conquests, and unique cultural identity. The word Turk holds deep meaning. In ancient inscriptions, it served as a self-designation and symbol of unity for the people. Scholars debate its origin. Some connect it to strength and power, while others link it to legality and truth. In any case, the ethnonym Turk became a unifying term for many tribes that gradually settled across the continent. The first mentions of the Turks, or Proto-Turks, appear in 6th century Chinese chronicles. The Chinese called them Tuyu and described them as powerful nomads, controlling the steppes north of the Great Wall. Additionally, information about them exists in Persian sources, where Turks are noted as warlike neighbors appearing at the borders of Iran and Central Asia. These early records became the starting point for a history that soon transformed the Turks from one of many tribes into a significant historical force. The question of the Turks' origin remains one of the most debated topics in historical science. The most well-known theory is the Altaic theory, which emerged in the 19th century. It claims that Turkic languages, alongside Mongolic and Tungusic, form a distinct Altaic language family, with the homeland of these peoples located around the Altai, Sayan Mountains, and the Yenisei River. This is suggested by similarities in grammatical structures and shared words for basic concepts like horse, water, and sky. However, many modern scholars are skeptical of this hypothesis, noting that long-standing contact between nomadic peoples in Central Asia could have led to mutual borrowings, not necessarily indicating a common origin. In the 20th century, another viewpoint arose, suggesting that the Turks could have formed as a separate group at the junction of the Sayan Mountains, Altai, and eastern Mongolia, where archaeologists find early burial mounds linked to Proto-Turks. These tribes lived in harsh conditions of steppes and foothills, basing their economy on nomadic pastoralism, raising horses, sheep, camels, and cattle. The horse held a special place in Turkic culture, serving not only as a means of transportation, but also as a symbol of wealth, strength, and military superiority. Archaeological finds show that even in the burials of simple warriors, horses were often placed alongside their owners, with their gear adorned with bronze and silver. The culture of Proto-Turks combined elements of practical nomadic life and vibrant spiritual life. The core of their beliefs was the cult of Tengri, the supreme sky deity. This wasn't just a religious concept, but an entire worldview. The sky was seen as the source of power and justice, while the Khan or Kagan was perceived as the son of the sky, obtaining legitimacy from Tengri. In addition to this, a developed shamanism existed, where shamans performed rituals, communicated with ancestral spirits, helped in healing illnesses, and foretold the future. Contacts between the Turks and neighboring peoples began even before the establishment of the first Turkic Khaganate. In the east, they interacted with China, and these relations were complex. On one hand, the Turks raided border territories, prompting the Chinese to fortify the Great Wall, while on the other hand, trade flourished. The Turks supplied horses to the Chinese, essential for their imperial cavalry, and in return received silk, metal goods, jewelry, and luxury items. In the West, the Turks encountered Iranian peoples, primarily the Sogdians, who acted as intermediaries on the Silk Road, playing a key role in the dissemination of literacy, religions, and goods between East and West. The earliest written mentions of the Turks date back to the 6th century. Chinese chronicles refer to them as Tuyu or Tuire and describe them as a strong tribe that subdued many neighboring peoples, noting their skill in blacksmithing and ironworking, which gave them an advantage in war. In later Persian and Arabic sources, the Turks are also depicted as warlike neighbors coming from the steppes and playing an increasingly significant role in the region's politics. Thus, before forming their own states, the Turks were already known to their neighbors and perceived as a powerful force. The formation of the Turkic Khaganate marked a turning point in Eurasian history. Until the mid-6th century, the steppe represented a mosaic of scattered tribes fighting for pastures and control over trade routes, but none managed to create a stable state. Everything changed in 552 CE when the Turks, led by Bumin Khagan, rebelled against their masters, the Xiongnu, a people that had long dominated Central Asia. Until this moment, the Turks had been subordinate, serving as blacksmiths and warriors for the Xiongnu. Chinese chronicles mention that they lived in the Altai Mountains and engaged in iron smelting and processing. Their metalworking skills and access to rich mines allowed them to build strength and prepare for rebellion. Victory over the Xiongnu and Bumin's proclamation as Khagan marked the beginning of the Turkic Khaganate. His brother from the Timin received the title of Yabgu, ruler of the Western territories, leading to a dual governance system, where the empire split into eastern and western parts, but remained under the control of the Ashina dynasty. Within a few decades, the Khaganate developed into a vast empire covering territories from Manchuria and northern China to the Caspian and Black Seas. The Turks established control over vital sections of the Great Silk Road, making them key players in trade between East and West. Their cavalry was highly mobile and dangerous, and their military structure ensured swift campaigns and the conquest of neighboring tribes. The main historical source of that time became the Orkhon inscriptions, created in the 7th century in Mongolia. These stone steles with Old Turkic runic script were discovered in the 10th century in the Orkhon Valley and became a true revelation for historians. They record speeches and instructions from notable Khagans, including Belga Khagan and his brother Kultigin. The texts contain descriptions of military campaigns, victories and defeats, as well as relations with China and other neighbors. However, even more significant is that they reflect on the fate of the people. They state that the Turks will face destruction if they abandon their traditions and ancestral laws, but they'll be strong if they remain loyal to Tengri and their Khagan. These inscriptions are not only a historical document, but also a philosophical legacy that reflects the self-awareness of the Turks. The state structure of the Khaganate merged military and sacred power. The Khagan was seen as the son of heaven, drawing strength from Tengri. His authority was supported by a council of nobles and military leaders. The steppe divided into regions, managed by Shads and Yabgus, who answered to central authority. The army formed the foundation, and each clan had to provide its warriors. Belief in Tengri and shamanistic practices strengthened society. The celestial deity was viewed as the source of power and victory, while shamans served as the link between people and the spirit world. Relations with China posed a constant challenge. The Turks raided the northern lands of the Celestial Empire while forming alliances, marrying Chinese princesses, and engaging in active trade. Chinese emperors sought to pit different Turkic clans against each other to weaken the steppe state. In the west, the Turks fought the Eftolites and, by uniting with Persia, destroyed their state, securing control over Central Asia. This allowed them to assert influence along caravan routes, taking a significant place in the global politics of that time. However, maintaining such vast lands was difficult. Internal contradictions, noble struggles for power and dependence on China's foreign policy gradually undermined unity. By the end of the 6th century, the Khaganate split into eastern and western parts. The eastern Khaganate, centered in Mongolia, often depended on China, rising and then submitting again. The western part, controlling Central Asia and the steppes of Kazakhstan, followed a more independent policy, interacting with Iran and Byzantium, then clashing with the Arabs. Despite its short life, the Turkic Khaganate left a significant legacy. It became the first state formation to unite steppe tribes under a single authority, establishing a tradition of nomadic empires continued later by the Uyghurs, Kyrgyz, and Mongols. It produced a written legacy that opens a window into the thoughts and values of early Turks. This experience of unity and struggle for survival in harsh steppe conditions laid the groundwork for the further development of Turkic peoples for many centuries. After the collapse of the Great Turkic Khaganate, a new political situation arose in Central Asia. Instead of one center, several emerged, and each Turkic tribe aimed to claim its place. The Uyghurs, Kyrgyz, and Karluks became the main heirs, influencing the region's future history. The Uyghurs established their own Khaganate in the mid-6th century, founded by Kutluk Bilge Kulkagan. The state's center was in Mongolia, in the Arkon Valley, with its capital in the city of Karbolgasun, often referred to as Ordubalik. This city became one of the largest in Central Asia at that time. Unlike previous nomadic empires, the Uyghurs emphasized not only military power, but also culture, literacy, and religion. A significant achievement was the creation of Uyghur script, based on the Sogdian alphabet, which was more convenient for long writings than ancient Turkic runes, eventually influencing Mongolian and even Manchu scripts. The Uyghurs displayed openness to new beliefs. In the 6th century, they adopted Manichaeism, an Iranian-origin religion that combined elements of Zoroastrianism, Christianity, and Buddhism. Manichaeism became the official religion of the Khaganate, influencing its art and worldview. Soon, Buddhism and Nestorian Christianity spread among the Uyghurs. As a result, the Uyghurs became cultural intermediaries on the Great Silk Road. Caravans passing through their lands brought not only goods, but also books, ideas, and images. In the Turfan Oasis, archaeologists discovered numerous texts in various languages: Uyghur, Chinese, Sogdian, and Tibetan. This attests to the multilingualism and cultural diversity of the Khaganate. Uyghur art reached a significant level. Cave monasteries in Turfan preserved paintings depicting Buddhas and saints, executed in bright colors and fine techniques. The Uyghurs also developed book production, being the first among the Turks to use paper for mass copying of texts. All of this distinguished them from other nomads. However, the military strength of the Uyghurs wasn't as solid as their cultural legacy. In the mid-9th century, they faced an invasion from the Yenisei Kyrgyz. In 840, the Kyrgyz defeated the Uyghurs and destroyed their capital, Karbolgasun. The Uyghurs scattered in various directions. Some migrated to Turfan and Gansu, establishing new oasis states, while others merged with neighboring tribes. Thus, the Uyghur Khaganate ceased to exist, but the cultural legacy of the Uyghurs continued to thrive and influence neighboring peoples. The victorious Kyrgyz initially lived in the upper reaches of the Yenisei. Their power spread over Mongolia, and for a time they became the dominant force in the steppes. Chinese chronicles describe them as a tall, fair-haired people, known for their severity and martial spirit. The Kyrgyz maintained a traditional nomadic lifestyle. Their wealth was measured by the number of livestock, and military strength by the number of horsemen. They skillfully used bows, swords, and heavy armor borrowed from neighbors. However, the Kyrgyz did not create a stable centralized state, nor did they leave as rich a cultural legacy as the Karluks or the Islamization of the Uyghurs. Their dominance was more of a military episode than a lasting civilization, but it changed the political balance in Central Asia. The Karluks played a crucial role after the collapse of the Turkic Khaganate, occupying the territories of Semirekhye and Fergana. The Karluks formed the basis for the future Karahanid state, the first Turkic Muslim power in Central Asia. By the 6th to 9th centuries, they established close ties with the Arabs and accepted Islam in the 10th century. This event marked a significant milestone. Through the Karluks, Islam began. Islam actively spread among Turkic tribes, gradually displacing religions like shamanism, Buddhism, and Manichaeism. With the arrival of Islam, the region welcomed Arabic script, new scientific and literary forms, and architectural and urban traditions. The Karluks not only emerged as a military force, but also as a trading power, controlling vital nodes on the Silk Road, which connected China, India, and Iran. They laid the foundations for cultural interaction that later led to the emergence of states in Central Asia, such as the Karahanids and Timurids. Their contribution involved transitioning the Turkic world from nomadic life to settled urban civilization based on Islam. Thus, the period following the collapse of the Great Turkic Khaganate became a time of radical changes and the emergence of new centers of power. The Uyghurs brought literacy, a variety of religions, and high art to Turkic culture, while the Kyrgyz demonstrated their military might and briefly became the dominant force in the steppe. The Karluks played a key role in the region's Islamization, laying the groundwork for future Muslim states. Each of these peoples uniquely complemented Turkic history, creating conditions for the rise of great empires. After the early Khanate and cultural centers like the Uyghurs and Karluks mark a new phase in Turkic history, their gradual entry into the Islamic world. This process was lengthy and complicated, but it shaped the future for most Turkic peoples, making them crucial pillars of Muslim civilization. The first contacts between the Turks and Islam date back to the 7th century, when Arab forces from the Umayyad and later Abbasid dynasties reached Central Asia. Initially, relations were hostile, and Turkic tribes, along with their allies, actively resisted. However, Islam slowly permeated their society, not just through military actions but also through trade, missionary work, and diplomatic alliances. The Sogdian merchants played a vital role in this process, trading along the Silk Road and promoting Arab culture. By the 10th century, many Karluk tribes, as well as the Agus and Kipchaks, began to voluntarily embrace Islam. They viewed the new faith not just as a religion, but as a legal system, written language, developed state structure, and an opportunity for integration into the vast Muslim world. The Agus Seljuks held significant importance in this history. They descended from a small clan living near the Caspian Sea and the sources of the Sirdarya. Their ancestor, Seljuk Bek, lived in the late 10th century and was the first from his lineage to accept Islam. From that moment, his descendants began to gain power. Initially, they served as mercenaries for the Muslim rulers of Khorasan, but soon became an independent military force. By the early 11th century, the Seljuks began major conquests. In 1035, they defeated the Ghaznavids at the Battle of Dandanakan and captured Khorasan. This success opened the way for them into Persia and Mesopotamia. In 1055, Tugril Beg, the grandson of Seljuk, entered Baghdad and received the title of Sultan from the Abbasid Caliph. From that point, the Seljuks became the de facto protectors of the Islamic world, their authority spreading over vast territories, including Iran, Iraq, Syria, parts of Central Asia, and Anatolia. The Seljuks not only conquered new lands, but also established a powerful state structure. The Sultan led, recognized as the protector of the Caliph, while regional leaders governed specific areas. To manage the state, the Seljuks widely employed viziers and divans, councils of officials. The most famous vizier was Nizam al-Mulk, who served the sultans Alp Arslan and Malik Shah. He wrote the treatise Siyasatnama, outlining the principles of governance and the necessity of strong central authority. He initiated the establishment of numerous madrasas, known as Nizamiya. The Battle of Manzikert played a crucial role in the region's history. In 1071, Seljuk Sultan Alp Arslan faced the Byzantine army of Emperor Romanos Diogenes near the fortress of Manzikert in eastern Anatolia. The battle ended in a complete victory for the Seljuks. The Byzantine army was defeated and the emperor was captured. Never before had a Byzantine ruler ended up in the hands of a nomadic leader. Alp Arslan showed magnanimity by releasing the captive for ransom. Nonetheless, the battle's consequences were enormous. The borders of Byzantium in Asia Minor collapsed, and Turkic tribes flooded in. This marked the beginning of a mass migration of Turks into Anatolia, where they formed the Sultanate of Rome, named after the word Rome, as Muslims referred to Byzantium. The capital of the state became the city of Konya. The Rum Seljuks gradually transformed Asia Minor into Turkic land, constructing cities, mosques, madrasas, and caravanserais, while actively developing trade and crafts. Their architecture, preserved to this day, blends Turkic and Iranian traditions with elements of Byzantine art. It was in Anatolia that the process of forming the Turkish ethnicity began, as Turks mixed with local Greeks, Armenians, and Arabs, creating a new culture. Gradually, the Greek language receded, while Turkic became the language of everyday life and administration. The Sultanate of Rome lasted until the 13th century, when it was destroyed by the Mongols, but it directly preceded the Ottoman Empire, which arose in the 13th century from the ruins of the Seljuk state. The Ottomans inherited the military and state traditions of the Seljuks, as well as their role in the Islamic world. Thus, the Turks' acceptance of Islam marked a crucial turning point in their history. If they had once been nomadic warriors of the steppe, by the 13th century they had become rulers of the Islamic world. The Seljuks not only expanded the borders of Muslim civilization, but also laid the foundations of statehood, which later served as the basis for the Ottoman Empire and modern Turkey. By the 13th century, when Genghis Khan began his great conquests, Central Asia and the steppes from Altai to the Don were already populated by many Turkic tribes, including the Kipchaks, Naimans, Kyriks, Karluks, and others. The Mongols, while creating their empire, didn't merely conquer these tribes, but actively integrated them into their military system. The Turks possessed rich experience in cavalry warfare, adeptly using both light and heavy cavalry, and wielded long-range bows, leading a steppe military lifestyle for centuries. Therefore, Genghis Khan and his successors relied heavily on Turkic tribes. Turkic speech increasingly echoed in their armies, and over time, Turks became the backbone of the military. The Mongolian Empire was divided among Genghis Khan's sons, with the western part going to Juchi, his eldest son. Here, in the lands from the Irtysh to the Dnieper, and then to the Danube, a state emerged, later known as the Golden Horde. Initially, it preserved Mongolian traditions, but its population consisted mainly of Turkic tribes. Gradually, the Kipchak or Polovtsian language became predominant in the horde. By the 13th century, even the descendants of Genghis Khan, while formerly remaining Mongolian nobility, switched to the Turkic language and adopted Turkic customs. This led to a phenomenon that historians refer to as the Turkicization of the horde. The Golden Horde became one of the key powers in the region of medieval Eurasian states. The Golden Horde and Rus covered vast territories from Siberia to the Danube, from the Caspian Sea to the Baltic. The horde's influence was felt in Persia, the Caucasus, and Eastern Europe, but it was particularly pronounced in Rus. In the 10th century, Russian principalities came under the control of the Khan of the horde. This occurred after Batu's campaign in the 1230s, when Russian lands were devastated. Since then, for over 200 years, Rus remained dependent on the Golden Horde. Princes traveled to the Horde for charters, documents granting princely rights, paid tribute, and acknowledged the Khan's supreme authority. This dominance significantly influenced the formation of Russian statehood. Rus adopted some aspects of governance from the Horde, such as the tax collection system, military organization, and principles of diplomatic relations. At the same time, the Horde's rule did not lead to the destruction of the uniqueness of Russian culture. Over time, the princes of the Moscow Principality managed to use the Horde's experience to strengthen their power and unify the lands. However, the Turks and Rus were connected not only through relationships. Subjugation. Even before the Mongol invasion, the southern borders of Russian lands neighbored the Polovtsians and Kipchaks. These nomads occupied the steppes from the Don to the Dnieper and regularly fought with Russian princes. Chronicles preserved accounts of many battles, and the epic The Tale of Igor's Campaign depicts the Polovtsians as adversaries. However, relations weren't always hostile. Princes often formed alliances with Polovtsian Khans and married their daughters. As a result, the Polovtsians significantly influenced the genealogy of Russian nobility. After the Mongol invasion, the Polovtsians became part of the Golden Horde and emerged as one of its leading peoples. Their language gradually became common across the Horde. Both Mongols and Slavs, as well as Iranian peoples under the Khans, spoke it. The influence of the Polovtsians extended beyond the steppes. Some of their tribes migrated to Hungary, leaving a mark on its culture and toponymy. The impact of the Kipchaks and Polovtsians is evident in the language and culture of many Eastern European peoples. Numerous Turkic words entered the Russian language, such as kazna, caravan, saray, bashmak, and ataman. Even fundamental concepts like money have Turkic origins. In art and epic literature, images of nomads and iconic warriors have persisted, becoming part of the region's cultural memory. Thus, in the 10th to 13th centuries, the Turks, as part of the Mongolian Empire, not only preserved their uniqueness, but also transformed a vast state. They established the Golden Horde as a Turkic power, defining its language and culture, and significantly influenced the fate of Rus and all of Eastern Europe. The Kipchaks and Polovtsians, once regarded merely as nomadic enemies, formed the foundation of a new historical reality, and their legacy continues to live on in culture today. After the collapse of the Seljuk Sultanate of Rome, numerous small Turkic principalities and beyliks emerged in Asia Minor. One of these beyliks was located in northwestern Anatolia and belonged to Osman, the son of Ertugrul. By the late 13th century, this lineage wasn't the most powerful among its neighbors, but its favorable position on the border with weakened Byzantium allowed it to expand. Osman and his warriors, known as Ghazis or warriors of faith, raided Byzantine fortresses and settlements. Their troops were mobile and well organized, relying on steppe cavalry traditions. By the early 14th century, Osman's beylik had become a rising force. His son Orhan captured important Byzantine cities, including Bursa, which became the first capital of the Ottomans. A regular army emerged, soon based on Janissaries. An infantry corps formed from Christian boys converted to Islam. This system, known as Devshirme, allowed the Sultan to maintain a military loyal only to him and independent of noble clans. A key moment in history was the conquest of Constantinople. In 1453, Sultan Mehmed II, known as the Conqueror, encircled the ancient capital of Byzantium after extensive preparation. Huge cannons capable of demolishing strong walls and effective siege tactics made what seemed impossible a reality. The city, considered impregnable for over 1,000 years, fell. Constantinople was renamed Istanbul and became the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. This event shocked the entire Christian world. For the East, it marked the definitive establishment of Muslim powers in the region, while for the West, it meant searching for new routes to India, ultimately leading to great geographical discoveries. After the fall of Constantinople, the Ottoman Empire experienced rapid growth. In Europe, its armies conquered Serbia, Bulgaria, Hungary, and seized most of the Balkans. Several times, the Ottomans approached the walls of Vienna, and all of Central Europe felt their pressure. In Asia, they subjugated Asia Minor, Iraq, Syria, and Palestine. In 1516, Sultan Selim II defeated the Mamluks and annexed Egypt, Hejaz, and the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. Ottoman sultans became not only rulers of a vast empire but also guardians of Islamic sanctities. In North Africa, their authority extended to Libya, Algeria, and Tunisia. In the Black Sea region, they subordinated the Crimean Khanate, making it a vassal. In the 16th century, the Ottoman Empire reached its zenith under Sultan Suleiman I, known as the Magnificent. His reign, lasting over 40 years, became a golden age for the state. The Ottomans controlled key trade routes between East and West and engaged in active warfare with the Habsburgs and Safavids, maintaining a powerful fleet in the Mediterranean. Their army was one of the strongest in the world, and the economy relied on controlling trade in spices, silk, and grain. However, the Ottoman Empire was not only a military power, but also a center of the richest culture. A unique architectural style emerged, blending Islamic, Byzantine, and Turkic art. The great architect Sinan, who lived in the 15th century, created numerous mosques, palaces, bridges, and aqueducts. His greatest works, the Süleymaniye Mosque in Istanbul and the Selimiye Mosque in Edirne, are still regarded as masterpieces of world architecture. The Topkapi Palace loomed in Istanbul, becoming a symbol of the Sultan's power and the center of imperial administration. Ottoman culture flourished in various fields. Artists created miniatures, calligraphers perfected the art of writing, and music, poetry, and crafts developed under the patronage of the Sultan's court. The Ottomans also advanced the education system. Madrasas provided knowledge in theology, law, astronomy, and medicine. The state became a true bridge between East and West, uniting Arab, Persian, Byzantine, and Turkic traditions. The legacy of the Ottoman Empire is still felt today. Modern Turkey is its direct successor, yet traces of the Ottoman world can be seen in other countries. In the Balkans, mosques, baths, bridges, and entire neighborhoods built during the Ottoman era remain. In the Arab world, administrative and legal systems established in Istanbul are still in use. Even in Eastern Europe and Russia, many Ottoman influences persist in language and daily life. The Ottoman Empire lasted over a century, from the late 10th century to the early 20th century, leaving a significant mark on 3 continents: Europe, Asia, and Africa. This was the era of an empire composed of conquerors, traders, scholars, and craftsmen, such as the Timurids and Uzbek Khanates, whose legacy continues to influence the political and cultural landscape of today. After the collapse of the Timurid state, Central Asia became a stage for the emergence of new Turkic state formations and tribal alliances, each contributing to the regional history. The Timurid era began in the late 14th century with the rise of Timur, known in Europe as Tamerlane. He was a Turkic military leader and political figure whose influence stretched from India to Asia Minor, from the Kazakh steppes to the Persian Gulf. Timur was born in 1360 in Samarkand and, through military achievements, created a vast empire. He positioned himself as a defender of Islam and a successor to Genghis Khan, although his origin had nothing to do with the lineage of the Chinggisids. His power relied on personal charisma, military discipline, and continuous campaigns. After his death in 1405, his empire quickly fell apart, but the Timurid dynasty continued to rule different regions. Among them, Ulugh Beg, Timur's grandson, gained the most fame, living in the first half of the 15th century. He is remembered as an outstanding astronomer and mathematician who built an observatory in Samarkand. There, observations led to the creation of a star catalogue that was considered the most accurate in the world for a long time. After the decline of the Timurids, Uzbek Khanates emerged. In the early 16th century, Shaybani Khan, a descendant of Chinggis Khan through Shiban, founded a new state in Mawaranar. In 1502, he conquered Samarkand and Bukhara, ousting Timur's descendants. The Uzbek Khanates, such as Bukhara, Khiva, and later Kokand, became vital centers of Islamic science and culture. They developed madrasas, built mosques, and thrived on trade along the Silk Road. Bukhara, in particular, gained a reputation as the Dome of Islam, attracting students from various regions. During this time, Kazakh Khanates began to form. In the mid-16th century, some Turkic and Mongolian tribes, dissatisfied with the Uzbek Khan's power, separated and created their own state, the Kazakh Khanate. Its rulers relied on the traditions of nomadic life and steppe unification. Over time, Kazakh society split into three major Jews: senior, middle, and junior. These associations weren't unified states in the common sense, but they organized the life of nomads, regulated kinship relations, and determined foreign policy. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the Kazakhs engaged in continuous wars against the Dzungars, Uzbeks, and Nogais. Under pressure from the Dzungar threat, Kazakh Khans began seeking support from Russia. In the 1730s, part of the Jews recognized the protection of St. Petersburg, marking the start of Kazakhstan's gradual incorporation into the Russian Empire. Turkmen tribes maintained a nomadic lifestyle longer than others, living in the Karakum Desert and oases along rivers, engaging in trade, controlling caravan routes, and raiding neighbors. The Turkmen never formed a unified state. Their associations were tribal in nature. Only in the 19th century did the Russian Empire establish stable control over their territories. However, even then, Turkmen clans retained their autonomy and ancient traditions. The Crimean Khanate, established in the 15th century after the fall of the Golden Horde, held a special place in Turkic history. Its rulers, the Giray dynasty, claimed descent from Chinggis Khan and considered themselves legitimate heirs of the steppe tradition. The Crimean Khanate maintained close ties with the Ottoman Empire, recognizing its suzerainty and being an ally in wars against Poland, Lithuania, and Russia. Crimean Tatars became famous for their cavalry, which regularly raided Russian and Polish lands, taking thousands of captives, a tragic chapter in Eastern European history. At the same time, Crimea served as an important trade and political center, with its capital, Bakhchisarai, symbolizing Turkic architecture and culture. The Ottoman Empire used Crimea to control the Black Sea, but gradually its influence weakened as Russia strengthened its position. By the late 15th century, after the Russo-Turkish Wars, Crimea was annexed to the Russian Empire, marking a significant milestone in the region's history. Thus, in the 15th and 16th centuries, many Turkic states and alliances existed in the east. The Timurids left a substantial cultural legacy and scientific achievements. Uzbek Khanates became centers of Islamic scholarship. Kazakh Jews continued nomadic traditions while gradually falling under Russian influence, and Turkmen tribes maintained independence and traditional lifestyles. The Crimean Khanate served as a link between the Ottoman Empire and Eastern Europe. This period demonstrated the diversity of Turkic state forms and the richness of their historical experience. After the Turkic Khanates played an independent role in the Middle Ages, they gradually fell under the control of two great powers, Russia and China. This process spanned several centuries and completely transformed the political and cultural landscape of Central Asia, the Volga region, and Xinjiang. Russia began actively expanding its borders into Turkic lands as early as the 15th century. In 1552, Ivan IV, known as the Terrible, captured Kazan, ending the Kazan Khanate, one of the largest heirs of the Golden Horde. 2 years later, the Astrakhan Ulus fell, and Russia established control over the Lower Volga and access to the Caspian Sea. In the early 17th century, the Siberian Khanate, a small state located in western Siberia, was conquered. From this moment on, the path eastward was open. Over the next 2 centuries, Russia gradually subjugated the Turkic peoples. In the 17th century, the Bashkirs in the Urals and Volga were subdued after repeatedly rising against Moscow's rule. By the 18th century, Russia had firmly established its presence in the Urals and Volga, extending its influence over the Nogais, Kalmyks, and Tatars. In the first half of the 19th century, systematic conquest of Central Asia began. In 1868, Russian troops occupied Tashkent, after which submission of the Kokand Khanate, Bukhara Emirate, and Khiva commenced. By the end of the 19th century, the entire region entered the Russian Empire, and Turkestan became its governorate. The religious situation in these lands was complex. Most Turkic people practiced Sunni Islam, but its character varied. In the Volga region, Islam among Tatars and Bashkirs had deep roots and intertwined closely with local traditions. In Central Asia, Islam was even stronger, with flourishing Sufi brotherhoods and numerous madrasas, while the cities of Bukhara and Samarkand were considered centers of Islamic scholarship. Russian power long regarded Islam with caution, but Catherine II changed this policy. In 1779, she established the Orenburg Muslim Spiritual Assembly, which became the official body regulating Muslims in the Volga and Ural regions. Thus, Islam found itself in a special position. It persisted but remained under state control. Alongside Islam, Orthodoxy also spread, and some Turks voluntarily accepted baptism, seeking privileges and protection. Some were baptized against their will. This led to the formation of specific groups among Tatars and Chuvash, who converted to Orthodoxy but retained the Turkic language and many aspects of their former culture. Consequently, the religious landscape of Turkic territories in the Russian Empire became diverse. Here, Islam, Orthodoxy, Uyghurs with their connections to China, and remnants of ancient shamanic beliefs coexisted. The fate of the Turks in China unfolded differently. There, the main Turkic people became the Uyghurs, residing in Xinjiang, also known as Eastern Turkestan. They established powerful khanates and states along the trade route. However, by the 18th century, this region came under the control of the Manchu Qing dynasty. In the mid-18th century, the Chinese army finally conquered Xinjiang and incorporated it into their empire. For the Uyghurs, this became the beginning of a prolonged period of subjugation and struggle to maintain their uniqueness. The Qing dynasty enforced strict control. They resettled Han Chinese and Manchus in Xinjiang, built military fortifications, imposed taxes, and implemented administrative norms that clashed with local traditions. The Uyghurs revolted several times, with one of the largest uprisings occurring in the 1860s, when they and other Muslim peoples of the region sought to create an independent state. For a while, the Kashgar Khanate existed under Yaqub Beg's rule, but the uprising was soon suppressed, and control was re-established. Russia and China's policies towards nomadic peoples shared many similarities. For both empires, the nomadic Turkic tribes posed a threat to stability. Russia feared the Kazakhs, Bashkirs, and Kyrgyz, who could flee to the steppe and incite revolts, while China viewed the Uyghurs and other Muslim peoples of Xinjiang as a danger. Therefore, both Petersburg and Beijing sought to settle nomads, limiting their movements and introducing a taxation system. In Russia, fortified lines such as the Orenburg, Siberian, and Semirechensk lines were created. Along these lines, military settlements and garrisons controlled the steppe and hindered the nomads from raiding. In China, military colonies and Han resettlement were used to alter the region's ethnic makeup. By the late 19th century, most Turkic peoples had lost their political independence and found themselves under the control of both empires. Nevertheless, despite this, Islam, tribal customs, and nomadic culture helped the Turks preserve their identity. The 19th century brought significant changes to the Turkic world. The Tanzimat reforms and Pan-Turkism emerged as the Ottoman Empire, once a mighty Eurasian power, slowly lost ground. At the same time, Turks in Central Asia were under the rule of the Russian Empire, while the Uyghurs were under Qing control. However, it was in Anatolia that events unfolded that would define the fate of the entire Turkic world in modern times. The Tanzimat reforms began in 1839 with the issuance of the Gulhane Hati Sharif, a decree announced by Sultan Abdülmecid Mundis. This decree emphasized the equality of all subjects before the law, regardless of religious affiliation, along with reforms in the military and tax system. It marked the first step towards establishing a rule of law. In 1856, the Hati Humayun was adopted, further equalizing the rights of Muslims and non-Muslims, aiming to strengthen the empire from within. The reforms also affected the military, inviting European instructors, opening military schools and purchasing modern weaponry. State banks emerged in the economy, and railroads and telegraph lines were constructed. Secular schools opened, and newspapers began publishing in Istanbul and other major cities, fostering new public thought. All these efforts aimed to catch up with Europe, which had already experienced the Industrial Revolution. However, despite these efforts, the Ottoman Empire continued to weaken. National movements in the Balkans triggered constant uprisings. Greece gained independence in the early 19th century. Later, Serbs, Bulgarians, and Romanians revolted. Each defeat for the empire intensified the sense of crisis. During this period, ideas of Pan-Turkism began to form in intellectual circles. This movement arose in the late 19th century among educated Turks, primarily Crimean Tatars and Azerbaijanis, who studied in Russian and European universities. They realized that all Turkic peoples, divided by empires and borders, shared common roots, language, and culture. The founder of this movement was Ismail Gasprinsky, a Crimean Tatar who published a newspaper and advocated for unity in language, thought, and action. He stressed that Turks should recognize their commonality and unite, even at a cultural level. By the early 20th century, Pan-Turkism began to influence political circles in the Ottoman Empire, particularly among the Young Turks who came to power in 1908. World War I became a test for all Turkic peoples. The Ottoman Empire joined the war on the side of Germany and Austria-Hungary in 1914, hoping to regain lost positions. Ottoman troops fought in the Caucasus against Russia, in Mesopotamia against the British, and in Palestine and Egypt against the British and French. One of the most memorable events was the Battle of Gallipoli in 1915. The Entente attempted to break through the Dardanelles, but the Turkish army, led by Mustafa Kemal, repelled the offensive. The victory at Gallipoli became a symbol of resilience and awakened national consciousness among Turks. However, the war overall ended in disaster. In 1918, the Ottoman Empire was defeated, and the Allies prepared to partition its territories. The Treaty of Sèvres proposed to divide Anatolia among Greece, Armenia, France, and Italy, with Istanbul and the Straits coming under international control. It seemed that only remnants of the great empire would remain. At this critical moment, Mustafa Kemal, the future Atatürk, emerged on the historical scene. In 1919, he arrived in Samsun and began organizing resistance against the occupation. Under his leadership, the War of Independence began, lasting until 1923. The Turks managed to defeat Greek forces, halt the advance of Armenian and French troops, and with the support of the people, Kemal achieved the annulment of the Treaty of Sèvres. The new Treaty of Lausanne solidified Turkey's independence within its modern borders. In October 1923, the Republic of Turkey was proclaimed with Ankara as its capital. The Sultanate was abolished, and a year later, the Caliphate was also dissolved. Atatürk implemented radical reforms. He introduced the Latin alphabet, replacing Arabic script, established a secular education system, granted women equal rights, banned polygamy, and abolished religious courts. He aimed to transform Turkey into a modern national state modeled after Europe. These changes made Turkey the first modern republic among Turkic peoples, serving as an example of how to preserve national identity while modernizing the country. Atatürk became a symbol of awakening and national revival. After the revolution of 1917 and the Civil War, the fate of Turkic peoples became intertwined with the new state of the Soviet Union. For some, this period offered opportunities for modernization and education. This time of challenges and repression became part of the history of many nations. In the 1920s, Soviet authorities began implementing a policy known as national indigenization, aimed at strengthening the cultures of various peoples within the new country and fostering a sense of belonging to socialist construction. During this period, national republics were established. In 1924, the Uzbek and Turkmen Soviet Socialist Republics were formed, followed by the Kyrgyz and Tajik republics in 1929. In 1936, the Kazakh Republic was formalized. The Azerbaijani Republic was located in the Caucasus, autonomous formations for Tatars, Karachais, Balkars, and other Turkic peoples. Formally, it looked like granting self-governance, but real power remained in Moscow. The policy of indigenization fostered the development of local languages. New writing systems emerged for many Turkic peoples. In the early 1920s, they introduced the Latin alphabet to simplify learning and distance cultures from Islamic traditions linked to Arabic script. However, by the late 1930s, they replaced Latin with Cyrillic, enforcing stricter integration of the republics into the Soviet system. Newspapers, textbooks, and books began to be published, and schools and theaters opened. This period witnessed the rise of new generations of writers, poets, and playwrights who shaped modern literature in their native tongues. In Kazakhstan, Saken Sayfullin created works. In Uzbekistan, Abdullah Kadiri, and in Azerbaijan, Samet Vurgun. However, by the late 1930s, heavy repressions began, and the national intelligentsia, a symbol of cultural revival, faced accusations of nationalism and ties to foreign states. Thousands faced arrests, exiles, and executions, significantly weakening Turkic societies and depriving them of entire generations of leaders. The years of World War II were particularly tragic. In 1944, by Stalin's order, entire Turkic peoples were deported. Crimean Tatars faced accusations of collaboration. From Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Azerbaijan, schools and cultural centers based on Turkish traditions operate. Turkey employs soft diplomatic methods, offering Turkic peoples a concept of unity based on language, history, and religion. At the same time, its foreign policy increasingly seeks independence. The country develops its own industrial capacities and military, actively participating in regional conflicts. The situation of Uyghurs in China remains one of the most pressing issues of our time. Xinjiang, also known as East Turkestan, was definitively annexed by China in the 15th century, and since then, Uyghurs have been under the control of the Chinese government. In the 20th century, they attempted several times to establish an independent state. The first East Turkestan Republic was declared in 1933 and the second in 1944. However, both initiatives ended in failure. Currently, Uyghurs make up a significant part of the region's population, but their cultural and religious rights face strict restrictions. Chinese authorities actively pursue a policy of assimilation, limiting the use of the Uyghur language and pressuring Islamic traditions. Special re-education camps are being established in the region. The international community has repeatedly expressed concern about the situation of Uyghurs, but Beijing continues to view this issue as an internal matter. Turkic people also play an important role in global migration. Millions of Turks live in Europe, primarily in Germany, where they began to migrate in large numbers in the 1960s as guest workers. Today, the Turkish diaspora has become an integral part of European reality, with its own schools, mosques, and cultural centers. In recent decades, Uzbeks, Kyrgyz, and Kazakhs have actively worked in Russia, Turkey, and the Persian Gulf countries, forming communities that maintain their languages and traditions while integrating into the global world. Azerbaijanis also migrate actively to Russia and Western Europe, where they play a significant role in business and trade. Turkic communities exist in the United States and Canada, as well as in Australia. Thus, the Turkic world is represented not only in Eurasia, but across all continents. The modern Turkic world is a mosaic complex, including independent states, diasporas, cultural centers, and peoples under the control of other countries. A shared identity based on language, history, and traditions unites them. Turkey acts as a political and cultural leader. Central Asia is a region with immense potential. Uyghurs symbolize the struggle to preserve their identity, while diasporas serve as a link to the outside world. The history that began in the Altai steppes continues today across all continents. The culture and spiritual world of the Turks have developed over centuries, blending nomadic traditions with the influence of great civilizations. Common roots connect Turkic peoples from the Balkans to Siberia and from the Volga region to Xinjiang. Since ancient times, Tengriism has been a crucial aspect of the worldview of the Turks, where Tengri, the eternal blue sky, is viewed as the main divine force, the source of power and justice. Tengri is not seen as a god in human form, but rather as a cosmic force determining the destinies of people and states. Nearby, spirits of the earth, water, and ancestors were revered. Shamans, known as Kam, acted as intermediaries between people and the spiritual world, performing rituals, healing illnesses, and predicting the future. This belief created a deep sense of connection between humans and nature, sky, and kin. Even after the adoption of world religions, Tengriist ideas continued to exist in rituals and traditions. Against the backdrop of Tengriism, Buddhism, Manichaeism, and Nestorian Christianity also developed among the Turks, particularly noticeable among the Uyghurs from the 6th to 10th centuries, when their state along the Silk Road became a center of cultural exchange. Buddhism brought written texts and art, Manichaeism offered a strict moral system, and Nestorianism established ties with the Christian East. However, by the 10th century, Islam became the main religion of the Turks. Initially, the Karluks and Agus tribes accepted it, followed by most Turkic peoples in Central Asia, the Caucasus, and the Volga region. Islam became not only a spiritual foundation, but also the basis for writing, law, literature, and architecture. Nevertheless, some Turkic peoples embraced Christianity. Chuvash entered the Orthodox world. Gagauz became Orthodox Christians, while Karayites preserved ancient Judaic traditions. Thus, the religious map of the Turks became diverse, but Islam became the unifying factor for the majority. The writing of the Turks has undergone a long development. The first significant monument was runic script created in the 6th to 8th centuries. These inscriptions, found in Mongolia in the Arkon Valley, contain texts about the exploits of Khans, wars, and national unity. They are carved on stone steles and still impress with their poetic nature. Later, with the spread of Islam, the Turks switched to the Arabic alphabet, which was used for centuries and became the foundation for many literary monuments. In the 1920s, many Turkic peoples began to use the Latin alphabet, but by the late 1930s, the Soviet Union transitioned their writing to Cyrillic. Currently, some countries like Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan are returning to Latin, emphasizing their cultural identity and independence. Turkic literature has preserved a great epic tradition, with one of the most significant being the Kyrgyz epic Manas. Its volume captivates the imagination, and researchers estimate it includes hundreds of thousands of lines, making it the largest epic in the world. Manas tells of a hero's exploits, his struggle for the land and people, and his descendants who continued his cause. The epic does not have a fixed. Forms have been passed down orally and performed anew over the centuries. Another remarkable work is Kitab-i Dedya Karkut, created in the 10th to 11th centuries among the Agus tribes. It describes the feats of heroes, customs, and spiritual values of that time. These pieces still serve as vibrant sources of national memory and identity. Music and oral creativity played a significant role in Turkic culture. Storytellers and singers Akins, Jirau, and Bakshi performed epics and songs, accompanying themselves on folk instruments like the dombra, kobis, and saz. Their art not only entertained but also educated, passing on history, laws, and moral values. Songs could be heroic, philosophical, or romantic, accompanying all important events in the nomads' lives, from weddings to wars. The oral tradition includes proverbs, riddles, and parables, shaping a unique type of thinking based on ancestral wisdom. The lifestyle of the Turks reflected their nomadic way of life. The main dwelling was the yurt, a portable round structure made from a wooden frame and covered with felt. The yurt was easily assembled and transported, perfectly suited for a nomadic existence. It held deep symbolism. Its dome represented the sky, while its round shape symbolized the harmony and integrity of the world. The interior was divided into male and female halves, reflecting family structure. Horse breeding occupied a central role in their economy. The horse was not only a means of transport but also a symbol of status, wealth, and military might. Traditional diets relied on livestock products like meat, milk, and kumis. The heritage of the Turks extends beyond the steppes they inhabited, influencing historical processes for centuries, affecting world history, culture, politics, and even modern aspects of globalization. By the early Middle Ages, the Turks became key figures in Eurasian history. In the 6th century, they established the first khaganate that united the steppe tribes. The Uyghurs, living in that same century, left written monuments that became important sources on ancient culture. In the 10th century, the Seljuks made Anatolia a Turkic land, paving the way for the formation of the Ottoman Empire. During this time, the Turks became part of the Mongol Empire, eventually becoming its cultural and military core. The Ottoman Empire reached Constantinople in the 10th century, making it its capital and transforming into one of the world's largest powers. Thus, for 1,500 years, the Turks found themselves at the center of events shaping the fate of an entire continent. Their cultural legacy influenced the daily lives of numerous peoples. This is especially evident in language, where many Turkic words entered Russian. For instance, the word saray means palace and connects to the Turkic term for a tent or residence. The word kazna relates to the concept of wealth and governance, while ataman reflects military leadership traditions. Terms like sablia, saber, and caravan came with military and trade ties. Even the word dengi, money, has Turkic roots dating back to the time of the Golden Horde. Turkic borrowings appeared in Persian during the Seljuks and Timurids when rulers were Turkic, while court language remained Persian. This created a unique cultural synthesis, where Turkic words penetrated high poetry and everyday speech. Turkic terms also entered European languages, mainly through Turkish. Words like kaftan, tulip, yogurt, and baklava reflect profound mutual influence between East and West. The influence of the Turks is also evident in material culture. Ottoman architecture blended Turkic traditions with Byzantine heritage, resulting in magnificent mosques, palaces, and bridges. The patterns of Turkic carpets are known worldwide, while music based on the sounds of the dombra, saz, and kobis preserved ancient melodies of the steppe. The oral tradition, including epics and works like Kitab-i Dedya Karkut, continues to be performed and perceived as part of a living culture. However, the legacy of the Turks encompasses not only cultural and linguistic aspects, but also political ones. In the 21st century, Turkic peoples began seeking ways to unite again. In 2009, an organization of Turkic states was founded, including Turkey, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. Turkmenistan and Hungary participate as observers. The organization's goal is to enhance cooperation in economy, culture, education, and politics, which can be seen as a continuation of the ideas of pan-Turkism that emerged in the 10th century, but in a more practical and modern form. This isn't about creating a single state, but about forming a solid union of countries united by history, language, and culture. In the contemporary world, Turks play a notable role through their diasporas. Millions of Turks live in Germany and other European countries. Uzbek, Kyrgyz, and Kazakh migrants work in Russia, Turkey, and the Middle East. Azerbaijanis and Tatars have established large communities in major cities like Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Kiev. Turkic communities also exist in the USA, Canada, and Australia. These diasporas maintain their language and traditions, while acting as a bridge between the Turkic world and other regions of the globe. Thus, the legacy of the Turks manifests in several dimensions. Historically, they were unifiers of the steppes and rulers of empires, from the Seljuks to the Ottomans. Culturally, they created unique monuments, from epics to architectural masterpieces. Linguistically, they left behind numerous words that have become part of everyday speech in various countries. Politically, they are once again seeking forms of unity while preserving their identity in a globalized world. Turks are not just the past, but also the present and future of Eurasia. Their contribution to world history is significant. Their culture continues to thrive and evolve, and their political role grows with each decade. The legacy of the Turks serves as a link between East and West, between ancient times and modernity, between the nomadic steppe and contemporary megacities.